Father's Day usually isn't synonymous with the word massacre. In fact, most would tend to agree that Father's Day is a rather laid-back holiday, most dads being easy to please. On the 16th of June, 1991, however, the city of Denver, Colorado would be rocked by a violent and senseless crime that took the lives of 4 people and still remains unsolved to this day. The United Bank building is hard to miss for those who have ever visited the Mile High City. Though it is now known as the Wells Fargo Center, the building is the 3rd tallest in Denver and towers over the city with its roof resembling that of a cash register, a very fitting look for a house of finance. The building took security very seriously, so much so that they had a strict no weapons policy. The first floor of the building housed the main branch of the United Bank, and despite it being Sunday, staff were present counting up that weekend's deposits from several stores, bars, and restaurants. Being Father's Day weekend, the 6 employees inside the bank had more to count than usual, and were tucked away in the open vault, meticulously counting and organizing the cash. In 1991, cash was much more prevalent as it is in today's society. You can imagine the amount of bills, change, and checks the employees had to sort through on a busy holiday weekend, and on a Sunday morning when most other banks aren't even open. Around 10:15 a.m., a disturbing call came into 911, reporting that the United Bank building had been robbed. Hardly any time passed before the police responded to the call and began to secure the scene with the FBI's assistance. What they discovered was much worse than a bank robbery, however. In total, close to $200,000 was missing, and 4 unarmed security guards were left dead. Police began to piece the timeline together, and it painted a picture of a very detailed and intricate robbery that pointed in the direction of someone knowing exactly how to get what they were after. In total that morning, 4 security guards were on duty with 6 bank employees. At 9:14 a.m., a call came into the monitoring room used by the bank guards, which was located 1 floor below ground level, under the bank. The call was placed from a phone positioned next to a freight door on the side of the building. The man on the other line said that he was the vice president of the bank, Robert Bardwell, and needed to be let into the building. 33-year-old William McCollum Jr. responded to the request by riding the freight elevator up to ground level. Upon opening the door, a gunman forced McCollum to take the elevator back to the sub-basement, where he was then shot and killed. McCollum was shot a total of 5 times, 3 times in the head, once in the chest, and once in the arm. The gunman hid his body in a storage closet and took his electronic key card. The gunman then made his way through the sub-basement and back to the guard monitoring room, setting off an alarm at 9:20 by entering a stairwell. Upon entering the guard monitoring room, he confronted 2 other guards, Philip Mankoff and Scott McCarthy, and forced them into a room used to store batteries for the surveillance equipment. There, he shot and killed both men. The 4th guard on duty, Todd Wilson, appeared to return to the area either during or immediately after the shooting, and he was also shot several feet away from the battery room. The FBI don't believe Wilson knew what he was walking into, as he was carrying food upon entering the room. He was killed instantly. In total, 18 shots were fired between the 4 security guards, and all but 1 shot hit its target. Before exiting the guard room, the perpetrator attempted to clean up any evidence they could. They took 10 security videotapes, bank keys, several pages of a logbook, and a 2-way radio. From there, they headed upstairs, and at 9:48 a.m., he entered the cash vault where all 6 employees were counting money. He ordered 5 of them onto the floor and to close their eyes. The 6th man, David Barranco, was the senior vault manager, and he was ordered to begin filling a bag with money. Once the gunman felt the bag was full enough, he ordered all 6 employees to crawl into a small room between the vault and the vault door, also known as the man trap. The man trap acts as an extra step of security between the vault and the outside door. The perpetrator then sealed the vault door on all 6 employees. At 9:56 a.m., the gunman left the building, being sure to leave no residual evidence behind, even collecting the shell casings of every round fired, leaving only the actual bullets and his description to go off of. Around 20 minutes later, the bank employees were able to free themselves from the man trap, and immediately called the police. When the robbery and massacre was over, the unknown man stole $197,000 and took the lives of 4 men. Oddly enough, though, the FBI noted that the robber left over $2 million behind and left before his bag was even full. With little to no physical evidence, the FBI was left to depend on the eyewitness descriptions of the man from the 6 bank employees. The man was said to be in his 50s or 60s, wearing a gray sport coat, a white shirt, a multicolored necktie, blue or gray slacks, a brown fedora, mirrored sunglasses, a mustache, and had a bandage on his left cheek. In addition to these descriptions, they were also able to determine that the bullets had been fired from a .38 caliber Colt Trooper revolver, a common police service weapon. The bullets also seemed to be from several different brands, and struck the FBI as unusual. Normally, where there is one crime scene with one weapon and one perpetrator, the bullets would be from the same manufacturer, or from the same box. The FBI was able to come up with a plausible scenario, however. Within the Denver police stations, it wasn't uncommon for them to store extra ammunition in what is referred to as an ammo bucket. Over time, these buckets can accumulate several different kinds of bullets. With this information and the fact that the shooters seemed to be quite accurate with their weapon of choice, the FBI believed they were looking for someone who was trained to shoot. Perhaps a police officer, active or retired, or a former bank security guard. The in-depth knowledge of the freight doors, sub-basement, guard room, and knowing that the vault would be open and money being counted, suggested that the perpetrator had intimate knowledge of the bank. A list was compiled by the FBI of active and former police officers, who had also worked security at the building. They then had each of the bank employees go through a photo lineup to see if it was possible to identify the suspect. Unfortunately, not a single one of the employees were able to positively identify any of the photos presented. The FBI then drew hats and sunglasses onto the photos, and once again presented them to the bank employees. This time, one of the 6 employees singled out a man. The photo was then shown again a third time to the employees, and this time 4 of the 6 agreed that this man was the shooter. The man in the photograph was 54-year-old James King. King was a former Denver police officer who had risen through the ranks to sergeant and retired in 1987. In 1989, King began working weekends at the bank as a security guard, and 10 months before the robbery, had left the job. All eyes turned into the direction of James King, and the FBI began digging through his bank records. In 1988, 1 year off the force, King and his wife had declared bankruptcy, and had over $25,000 in credit card debt. In the days following the robbery, King opened a large security deposit box at a bank, and he also owned a .38 Colt Trooper from his days on the Denver police force. The FBI was increasingly suspicious of King, given his previous employment, his overwhelming debt, and the fact that for years he had sported a mustache, but shaved it off following the robbery. They decided there was too much to ignore, and he was subsequently arrested on July 4th, 2.5 weeks after the robbery. His home was searched for the murder weapon, but it couldn't be located. He was questioned and told the FBI that the weapon was gone. He said the cylinder had cracked, so he took it apart and disposed of it. When asked where he was on the morning of the robbery, King said he was present in downtown Denver. He said he went to a community center to play chess, but upon investigating his alibi, they learned the chess club hadn't met at this community center in years, and no one there could say they ever saw James King come in and asking about said chess club. Despite the lack of physical evidence, James King was taken to trial almost a year after the massacre, with his fate hanging strictly on the circumstantial evidence surrounding him. The DA felt confident presenting the evidence against King, which relied heavily on the fact that he used to be an officer and security guard, and the fact that 5 of the 6 employees picked him in a photo lineup. However, King's attorney pointed out how nothing pointed in the direction of King being responsible for the murder of 4 men, especially the fact that shaving his mustache and getting a security deposit box are not crimes. When he cross-examined the witnesses with the photo lineup, he showed them a similar photo of a man with drawn-on glasses and a hat. The eyewitnesses were unable to accurately identify the man in the picture. It was then revealed that the photo was that of Harrison Ford, essentially blowing up the entire prosecution's single best piece of evidence against King. King also got a lucky break when a neighbor of his said she had seen King mowing his lawn the same time the robbery happened. In addition to this, King's attorney brought in the head of security at the bank, who explained that the man trap on the vault door was added after King had left the job. In order to understand and work the man trap, one would have to have knowledge about the way it works and operates, and if King had left the position prior to its installation, he wouldn't have known how it worked. His attorney also presented 2 other viable suspects to the case, Dewey Calvin Baker and Paul Yocum. Dewey Calvin Baker had robbed a bank in California after the bank robbery in Denver, and had confessed to reporters that he was responsible for the murder of the 4 men, but later recanted. Paul Yoakum was a former security guard at the bank and had been tried but acquitted of robbing a United Bank ATM for $30,000 about 11 months before the Father's Day robbery. He lived within a mile from the United Bank building, and the FBI had searched his home. 2 FBI agents testified that they had found .38 caliber bullets, fake police badges, speed loaders, and various other incriminating items within his apartment. A theory was presented that Yoakum had an accomplice in the robbery of the United Bank building. Hours before the robbery that same day, at 5:04 a.m., something, or someone, triggered an alarm in a storage closet in the basement. Within seconds, the alarm was turned off before anyone could investigate what or who it was. The idea is that this is when Yoakum gained access to the building with his accomplice, who was one of the active security guards that day. He then decided to murder his accomplice to silence them or to keep the money for himself. This could also be why all the security guards were murdered, as they knew Yoakum or his accomplice. In his final argument, King's attorney presented all the facts and destroyed each bit of evidence the prosecution had presented, and after 53 hours of deliberation, King was acquitted on all charges. For years, the FBI surveilled King and his records, hoping to catch him slip or find some sort of evidence that would link him to the crime. However, that day never came, and James King died in 2013 from dementia, living out his final years in what was described as a, quote, hermit's existence, unquote. Paul Yoakum died of a heart attack 4 months after the acquittal of James King. To date, not the murder weapon or any of the money has ever been found. So what really happened on that Father's Day in 1991? Who is responsible for the senseless, premeditated murder of 4 unarmed young men? The available evidence, no matter how small, paints a clear picture to the motives and possible background of a suspect. But the FBI are still no closer to catching the man responsible for the massacre. And until they do, Polygraph investigates.